Ambassador was sent to Niger in response to the Vice President's questions about this issue. So assumedly, the Vice President got a report back in response to his question, and that report contained the Wilson memo of his assessment of the situation.
The question remains, who did the document? Who forged the document? And why? The list is possibly short. Somebody ought to be able to work on that.
Wilson says his family is the subject of a smear campaign by senior administration officials. They deliberately leaked his wife's identity as a covert CIA operative, damaging her future career and compromising past missions, after he criticized the administration on Meet the Press and in the New York Times.
The White House hatchet men came out and started writing articles in which they basically said that Wilson, the first one came out and said that Wilson told the truth because he's a Democrat. Set that up as an argument. Democrats tell the truth, ergo Republicans fill in the blank. Then a couple of senior administration officials leaked to Bob Novak that my wife was a CIA operative involved in the weapons of mass destruction business at the CIA.
Senior administration officials is a key to being it's typically the president, vice president, cabinet officers, and the top of the White House had gone out of their way to get that information out. Not only told Novak, told Time magazine, they wanted that information out. Now, that's against a statutory law that prohibits the identification of CIA operatives.
What you're doing when you expose a CIA officer of any name, you're basically taking their entire career and flushing it down the toilet.
It also has the potential of placing that person in jeopardy because of their operations, and their own operations and people they have operated with in jeopardy. So it was a very vengeful act against the ambassador to try to hurt him by hurting his wife's career, if not wishing her physical damage. I had never seen a dirty trick that could be a hit.
A president of the United States and an administration who has come to office on a platform of restoring dignity and honor to the White House. What they did was neither dignified, nor was it terribly honorable, nor was it germane to the issue at hand.
It is fair to say that the Iraq War was a diversion from the war on terrorism. It certainly meant that people weren't paying as much attention to Afghanistan as they should have, and the resources that might have gone to Afghanistan ended up being focused more in Iraq.
If you attack another country with no justification, people are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't a war on terrorism. This is a war this is imperialism. This is colonialism, And this is why it's a distraction, because you need the help of these people. If you get this view that the CIA and the FBI are lurking around the bazaars and the souks of the Middle East and handcuffing people or assassinating, that's not the way the world works. You've got to have the help of the locals to identify these people and either put them in jail or remove them from positions where they can do harm.
In January of 2002, as I was sitting in the bunker of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I and several colleagues were sitting around the one little working TV, and lo and behold, here came the infamous statement of the axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And we all looked at ourselves and went, oh my God, here we are kind of in ground zero of Afghanistan. And Washington's talking in very belligerent terms about these other three countries, and we don't have Afghanistan anywhere close to being settled.
The only person Saddam was a threat to at this point, as we saw when the army collapsed, was to Iraq. He didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He wasn't scaring anybody, certainly wasn't scaring the Iranians or the Turks or the Saudis or anybody else. It was a state that was on the verge of failure. Now it is a failed state. Failed states cause terrorism. You can name them. Afghanistan, Lebanon, Somalia, Anytime you create a vacuum, it's where people flock to, or discontented, to fight wars.
The only real connection is that having invaded Iraq, we are very likely to make it a focus of terrorism. We are likely to produce what the president has said Iraq represents, namely the central battlefield in the war on terrorism. Why? Because we've sent a lot of Americans into a place where they're sitting ducks for people who think the only good American is a dead one.
"22 people were killed in the attack. About an hour ago, a massive car bomb ripped out the corner of the building here, and the casualties are still coming out."
Iraq cannot be governed by Americans. I don't care what the intention is. I don't care if we truly want to build a democracy. It cannot be ruled by a foreign power.
We, as the one indispensable nation of the world, as we characterized ourselves for so long in the last administration, cannot contemplate that possibly someone else might not like everything we call the American way of life, and that they would, in fact, welcome us into their countries. This may not be the case.
The only tool in the toolbox of the Bush administration is military force. Military force is a very blunt instrument. It just doesn't work. We've created more terrorists in Iraq, and we haven't even solved the problem in Afghanistan.
One of the more ironic effects of the attack on Iraq was to buttress other countries in the conviction of the famous remark by an Indian general after the first Gulf War, when he said the lesson of this war is that if you have to fight the United States, you better have nuclear weapons.
In some respects, it's as if Vietnam didn't even happen. It's as if a lot of our leaders have suffered some kind of historical and political lobotomy. And that's frightening. And every American should be concerned about that, because the United States ultimately is supposed to be an exemplar for the rest of the world. We are supposed to be, in Ronald Reagan's words, that shining city on a hill. Well, that shining city is looking kind of slummy right now in terms of our image abroad, and I think with good reason. We've violated, I think, fundamental principles that have guided this country's foreign policy so successfully since 1947.
You don't want your president to be seen as a hot dog. And when your president gets into a jumpsuit and gets in the back of a jet and lands on an aircraft carrier and then waddles out with his little straps between his legs, and that's not, I mean, you want a sign of kind of maturity and not testosterone blasting through when you're talking about things so fundamentally important as sending a nation to war and sending young men and women to their deaths.
There is a sense in Washington now that you can't raise objections to this because you're not supporting the troops in the field. I would rapidly point out that unlike almost anybody I know that holds office in this country, I've had two sons in uniform, both of whom have been in combat, and so I don't have to take any nonsense from anybody, nor will I.
Mark Twain's definition of patriotism is patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when it deserves it.
Well, I don't think it's patriotic to stand by and remain silent while your country stumbles into disaster.
Patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels, and I think these are scoundrels. They have no argument now. They have no defense for what they did. The country is in a terrible international security situation that I think is perilous. So they're attacking the patriotism of others.
Having been an insider, I know that the insiders don't have it all right. They make mistakes, and indeed, there's more likely to be mistakes, and there's more likely to be misjudgment if there is no criticism.
It was Jefferson who said that our kind of government is not based on trust. It's based on, in fact, suspicion.
Supporting the Constitution, understanding what's in the Constitution, caring about the Constitution. That's why we don't have a king, because we have a piece of paper. So I think that is patriotism.
It's not just those of us who've been privileged to serve actually in the government who are the patriots. It's every citizen who respects and honors the fact that we have such a wonderful country.